Okay, so now we're going to be recording this. Again, we're talking about Access Web Apps. The presentation that I'm about to give, this is Andy Tabus. We're going to give a presentation on Access Web Apps and how you can utilize a local client system to connect to the data that's within a web app. So, like I said, this is what an Access Web App is, and we're going to view this web app in Access 2013. So I'm actually going to take. I've got Access open. You can see I'm not running a database right now. So in the upper right-hand corner, we talked about this before, but whenever you get ready to customize an Access Web App, in the top right is this little settings button, and under settings you can choose Customize in Access. What that does is it downloads a little file. It's called AccessDW. So it's a web app file, Access Database Web App. And when I click on that, it's going to automatically open up that web app in Access 2013. So when this opens, you'll see the forms and you'll see the tables that are built within that web app. Now, one thing to keep in mind is whenever you're editing an Access Web App, you have to be online. All of these tables are stored in SQL Azure in the cloud. All of the views that you see here, all of these forms, these are all stored in the cloud. And so, and if you were to really look behind the scenes at this information, these are actually stored within XML files, within tables in the cloud. That's how they build these. So this is the web app side. In this side, we can edit the tables here. So if we wanted to create a new table, it's just like you would normally create it in a desktop app. We would click on New Table here, and then when we create a new table, we can tell it, what fields do we want to add to that table, and you can do all of that. Go ahead and wait for it to catch up on us. So you can add, tables just like you would in a client app. Okay, that's form view. Okay, so let's try that again. Okay, so here we're going to, we can either create a new table using a template, or we can click on New Blank Table. So when you click on New Blank Table, it automatically adds your ID here. And just for kicks, I'm going to go ahead and put in some basic info. So just first name, last name. Okay, so basically our basic name information. I can go ahead and save this. It's going to ask, I'm just going to save this as table, test table, doesn't matter. We'll delete it later on. So creating a table within your web app is just as easy as creating a client table. So so you've got your just like creating that, and I'm going to close out of this one. Creating that is just as easy as creating a client-side table. The same thing goes for forms. Same thing goes with queries. And we're going to go down here. You can see we've got macros, and you'll see here that we are missing reports, and that's because in a web app, no, Jim, you can't change the. I don't believe you can change the ID field name. Let's test that out real quick. So test it real quick. Again, save that. Oops, I guess you can. Good. Yeah, so you can do that. All right, good question. And so you get your tables, forms, queries, and macros, but you don't have reports. And the reason why is you're browsing this information in a web browser, and the web browsers aren't the prettiest way of working with that. And so if you want to give a pretty report to a client, or like in a PDF format or something like that, then a lot of times what you'll want to do is connect to the data and create a desktop database that would, and I'm going to delete, I'm going to hide this so that it doesn't appear on our client. So we might want to create those kind of reports in a local database. So the steps to start off with are, if we were in File, click on File, under here, we've got what are called connections. So in here, we can choose what kind of a connection we want to have. We can tell it to only show, only allow connections from this location. We can tell it to allow connections from any location on the internet. We can tell it to only have a read-only connection. And if you want to view the read-only connection information, you can click on this. And this is the important stuff that you want to keep track of. So if you want to use ODBC to connect to this raw data, you'll want to jot down this information. You've got your server, you've got your database, you've got your username and password. So you've got that information so that you can create that connection. We'll get into that in just a second. I'll show you that. Beyond that, you can, obviously you can reset your connection password. You can also enable read-write connections. Now, enabling a read-write connection is important because that's, if you need to edit the data in the table, then you need to be able to, do that. So we need to set up, make sure that this is enabled in order for us to actually edit the data in our local client database. So that's very important. In some cases, you may not want to do that, where you're just creating like a reporting database. In some cases, you may not want to allow people to do that. You can also view the read-write connection information if you want to, and you can also reset the password. You can also disable all connections, which is on the bottom. Kind of a hidden one that you have to scroll down. There's a little tiny arrow, and when you hover over that, you'll see disable all connections. So if I want to create only a client-side database that has a read-only connection, we can use this button called Create Reports. So this Create Reports will do that for you. You can do that. Now, 90% of the time that I do it, a lot of times most of the time I want to edit that data, that information. So I will create a connection that is a read-write. So if you haven't done an ODBC connection before, I'll show you kind of how to do that. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually create a brand new database. We're going to create a blank database, and I'm just going to call it test database. And I'm not going to go through every step of this, but I do want to take you through but I do want to just show you the basics. I think people have done this. If you've done ODBC connections before, you're probably comfortable with this, but I just want to kind of give you a follow-up. So in here, we would click on external data. You would click on the ODBC database. We would want to link to the data source, which is okay. And then it's going to ask you how you want to link. If you don't have a name already created in here, then you're going to go and click on machine data source. You're going to click on new to create a new one. I usually do system data source. And then it's just kind of following the prompts. Go down to the bottom, you choose native client, choose finish, and now it's going to ask you what is that information? What is the what name do you want to call this? And I can call it Andy SQL connection or whatever. And here's the important part is what SQL server do you want to connect to, that kind of stuff. So this is where it's important. See if I have, I did a quick screenshot, so I'm just going to overlay this for a second. But it's going to ask you the questions. This over a little bit. It's going to ask you the questions that are listed here. So it asks you, what SQL server do you want to connect to? You need to use the SQL server that's here. It's going to ask you, what is your login ID? That's going to be the username. What's the password? You're going to use the password. It's going to ask you, what is the default database? You're going to use the default database name here. And then it's going to ask you, what's the mirror server? And it's basically asking for this again. So by doing that, it's allowing you to have that ODBC connection. So you're building that, you're putting it on your local system, and that way it's available for the future. Okay, so we've got another question. Is linking in this manner the approach you would use to transfer existing data, Access data into your new Access app tables? Well, there is, if you're building a new database from scratch, you can automatically create an Access web app using current Access tables. So basically, you're converting your Access tables to SQL. So that's kind of the way you would go about. That's probably the fastest way to do it. Are those values you can set, or are they automatically created when uploading? Those values are set whenever you are. I'm going to jump back to the web database for a second. And I've got another web database here called projects. We'll jump into that for a second. And so on any of those, whenever you build an Access web app, you automatically need to you want to keep track of this information that it gives you. So it defines this. It defines the database name. It defines the password for you, so it automatically does that. And so whenever you want to get into it, you have to go into Manage, and you'll want to click on View Read-Only Connection Information, and that's where you gather that. And you can see, pull up the Word document again. So you can see this is one database I created. This is another database I created. They both have database Windows Net, but you can see the number that's displayed here is different than what you see here. Password is different. All of that information is different. So, good questions. And so that's basically how you go about doing it. Now, one of the reasons that I have for creating a local database, actually there's multiple reasons for doing that. Hold on just a second. I see another question. Yeah, so the server database and username are out of my control. That's correct. So you just want to, luckily it's built into here. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll copy that information out and store it in Google Doc or on OneDrive or something like that, just so I have it local. I've also seen some people create tables that stores that GUID information so that you have access to it in a table, so you don't have to click on these different things. The biggest things to remember is if for some reason you can't edit the data, make sure that you have enable read write on, because when you look at this, it shows a little checkbox, but it's really not on. You actually have to click on it. Here, it's going to make the change real quick. And then when this is on, you'll see that it turns kind of a pink. So now you can see it's got a box around it. That's how you know that it's enabled. So it's to just keep that in mind, that the checkbox does not mean, the check does not mean that it's actually active. So good. So okay, so let's talk about what's the purpose of having a local database. Well, there's a few different things. First of all, the way I like to design systems is the local client systems has much more power than what you have on Access Web Apps. Remember, on Access Web Apps, you can only use the macro interface, so you can't write any VBA code. You can't do any of those kinds of things. You're very limited into, there are no like on lost focus. There's an after update, but there's no on lost focus or on mouse down or those kind of things. So what you find is that you kind of build this hybrid system that allows all of the power for people that are running the system locally to be able to do everything that you need it to do. And you primarily build the Access Web App for people that are either clients that need to access their data, or vendors where you want to be able to have them enter their data, as well as people that are on the road for that. So in the waterfall cap that I've developed, the vast majority is a client interface, because we have mortgage bankers from across the country logging in and entering information into that, and then they're running the calculation. All of that needs to be done as a web app, in SharePoint, basically as a hosted app. But I also want to be able to do some things that people that are in the web don't need to see. So for the client, we built what's called a reports PC, and what we do in the reports PC are a number of different things. We do all of the invoicing through that reports PC, so that's done all on the local network. Once again, we can't create PDF files in the web-based version. It just doesn't look as pretty. So one of the way we've gotten around that is that if you create a report in a local copy of the database, so a local client side or desktop database, you can create your reports that are pretty there. And so the way we handle that is in the web app itself, we allow, and actually let's jump into it real quick. I'll show you real quick. So if we're going to jump back into the web, I'm back in the web app. I'm going to go in, I'm going to show you how clients request reports. So basically what we do is they request a report, and what actually happens is the report is sent through the client database, through the desktop database, as opposed to being sent to them on the web. Now the client, the customer, I should say customer, not client, because I don't want you thinking database client. The customer doesn't realize where that report is coming from. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go ahead and put in my initials, click on OK, open this up. Hold on a second, let me pull up a different record that has data. So in here, I'm click on Show HAMP Results. So here's a report that a person could potentially get. You'll see up here, we have a spot for them to enter an email address or an email CC. And when, if they want this report emailed to them, all they do is they fill in that information and they click on Email Report. All this email report does, and it says your report has been scheduled for emailing. You should receive it shortly. So what I have is on the desktop side, it's searching for any. I actually have a flag in there that there's a table that's stored for report requests. I'll show you what that looks like. You can see down here at the bottom, reports@waterfallcalc.com. So that report has already been sent. So I've already received it in my email. Let's take a look at that real quick. Second. Pull this. Sorry, I've got multiple screens running here. And so here I've received an email from reports@waterfallcalc.com. We've attached your Waterfall Calc report that was requested by. I happen to be logged in as me. And so here's your what your report looks like. So this is a PDF report. It's it's pretty. You can print it. You can do whatever you want. But the client really doesn't know that this report is coming from the report system itself. So we're going to take a step back, and I'm going to pull up that system real quick. Hold on a second. I'm going to log into client system real quick. So, okay, so we've got another, while this is loading, I'm actually logging into my client's computer, and I'm going to show you their system so you can kind of see what it looks like. But we've got another question here. Okay, so Dave asked, that pop-up message that was generated when you clicked email report, is that customizable? It looked like it identified the application where the long domain address, not very pretty. So what he's saying, let me move this back, and I'll show you that again. So what he's saying is that when I clicked on email report, it popped this up. This is actually a message box from Access 2013. If this is one of those pet peeves that I have. If this is done and you're running the Access web app in Internet Explorer, this will appear just like a regular message box does. But because I'm running it in Chrome, it's showing the page at whatever SharePoint says this. And one of the really gross things is that if you have a message that is multiple boxes, what ends up happening is that it will show this box, and you have to click on OK. It'll show the next one, OK, click on the next one. Then there's a little checkbox that says, do you want to stop other messages from popping up? Thinking that there's a bunch of pop-up messages that are all happening, like somebody is, you've got some virus or something, it's popping up all these pop-up messages. So in Internet Explorer, this will look fine. Unfortunately, I'm running it in Chrome, and this is one of those things that you have to deal with. So great question, Dave. Okay, so I'm going to show you again. I'm going to pull over. This is what the desktop database looks like from my client PC. We actually have different versions of the database. We've actually got 3 different versions, and the reason why is the federal government has different calculations. Basically, every 4 to 6 months, they release a whole new set of rules of what qualifies for different programs and what doesn't qualify. So that's one of the issues with the waterfall calc is it's just going to be completely maintained, and people and clients need bankers need to be able to see what the data look like in previous calculation, in previous history. So we need to leave that in there. So what I want to show you is that we have this table created called Table Send Reports, and it shows you who basically what all it's doing is it's actually storing a row in here. It's showing who requested it, when it was requested, and then there's a flag here for is the report sent. And so what happens is every minute the system checks to find out, is there a report that needs to be sent? If there is, it ought to, and you'll see in this database, I'm going to scroll down, you'll see that we have different reports. We have LM, which is a loss submit report. We've got our repayment is one of the choices, HAMP report, a standard waterfall report. There's also a forbearance report. So depending on what the results were of the calculation, because the calculation, again, it's got thousands of calculations to determine what should happen with that loan. It becomes one of the four. It's either a forbearance or it's loan, a loan modification, or it's repayment, or it's HAMP. Those are the four choices. And so based on that, it determines what report the client needs, and then it just puts a record in here of what needs to be sent. And then we've got that open form is actually checking about once a minute for any reports that need to be sent, and then it sends it. And so that's kind of how I'm going to move this back over here for a second, so we kind of get it out of the way. So that's how that works. Now, another way that I use Access Web Apps is I've got one client. It's called Johnson Controls. They're a Fortune 500 client here in Michigan. They've got locations all over the place, but basically, in their case, they build car seat rails. So in regular automobiles, the rails that car seats sit on. It's kind of interesting. And Jim and Dave and Tom, and I'm sure a bunch of you guys have run into this, is there's when you're working with different clients, there's things that there's products and services and things that you never thought even existed until you get into it. So this is one of those. You never really think about how they manufacture a car rail. But basically the way the process works is they buy steel from Germany, and they buy these huge rolls that weigh tons from Germany. And when they place the order, the vendor in Germany jumps into the web app and records when they're putting it on the freight, sent via freight or over the ocean. So they record when it's sent. They record the tolerances that they had in the steel. They're putting all of that information in. Then it goes to another place to get cut up into smaller rolls, which are still weigh tons. Then it arrives at the Johnson Control plant. It goes into they check it into inventory, and so the cool thing is when the vendor ships it, they're entering it into the system, so they know when to expect it. When that steel gets shipped to one of their other vendors to cut it up, that vendor logs into the system and puts all that information in it as well. And then after the rails go through everything that the local system does, then they actually send it out to other companies. Sometimes it gets painted, sometimes it gets deburred, which is kind of like sanded. And so they've got different vendors checking things in and out. And it works out great because those vendors always have access to the web app in order to do that. but you can still keep the power in your local database. So that's kind of how that process works. And so the report system again, because if you want to be able to work with reports in web apps, you really need to develop those reports. I mean, you can create a form that kind of looks like a report, like what we've done, here with the show HAMP reports. It kind of looks like a report, but it's not really a report. So if I went to print this, I'd still have some of this other junk being seen. So this gives us the ability to not only create prettier reports, but also add a lot of functionality to the local system. So that's kind of how that works. We've got another question here from Dave. Are there any differences in the process to or the abilities with publishing an Access web app to Office 365 versus SharePoint? So really, when you have your Office 365 license, it's really coming with the capability of storing that web app. So in order to share that, you've got a couple different choices. You can either have you can either purchase SharePoint licenses, and the last time I checked, SharePoint licenses were like $3 per user per month, and there was another one $7 per user per month. They have different capabilities, and things like that. And so you can either allow people to do that with the waterfall calc. That's what we do. We actually give them. We don't give them, but they purchase a SharePoint license. We don't make any money off of it, but that gives them not only the ability to run the waterfall calc app, but also mortgage bankers can also. It will store the PDF reports on the server so they can look at those later on. In the future, we're going to be adding the invoice reports on the server so they can see that, as well as payments, things like that, invoices, so they'll be able to do those kind of things. So really, the process in terms of hosting the app is just as easy. Basically, you're saving it as an app. One thing you have to be careful of is though, I recommend creating the tables first using your Access web app. That way, they're done in SharePoint, they're done in SQL Azure basically, and then connect through ODBC to those tables, and then build your client system. It's just an easier interface than building all your tables locally and then porting those over to SQL, and and it's just an easier way to do it. So we've got another question here from. Hopefully that answers your question, Dave. We've got another question from Charles. Could you discuss some of the practicals around building and deploying a database to a customer? What are different approaches to developing and installing it? Does a customer need an Access 365 account? If they don't, might you host it on your own account, build it on your own machine, and then upload it to their account? I noticed you remote accessed into your customer's machine. Okay, great questions. So, so when you build an Access web app, what happens is it stores that file as an ACCDW file. Let's see. Well, let's do that real quick again. So if I'm on my Access web app, I can click on this settings, choose Customize and Access, and it downloads the file locally. Now, with this file, I should take a step back. So I can either we can either go to SharePoint and then create an Access web app through SharePoint, where I did basically you're creating the icon. We just show you. Let's do this real quick. We'll just give everyone kind of a quick overview how we did that. So in SharePoint, and if you want more detail on this, we recorded another session, but there's a couple different ways of creating an Access web app. You would go to your site contents. I'm going to search for Access. In here, I would click on Access App. It would ask me to name it. I would name the app. Once the app is named, you can download the app, and eventually you would create what's called an app package. So you see here, Access App Package. So now I'm going to jump over to, I think I still have, good, yeah. So I still have this open. So if I had created this, I can also create something locally, and then I can click on Create As, and I can create a new app package. If I do this, Save as a new app package, it becomes what's called a .app file. Now, I could have done all the development locally on my system, my server, if I wanted to, on my SharePoint site, however I wanted to. When I'm ready to give it to the client, I just click on Save as a new app. It downloads that .app file. Now I can go on the customer's SharePoint site and load that .app file there. So if we jump back over to SharePoint, we can, let's see, add, maybe I closed it. So let me go back over here. And so in Access App, again, it says, or upload an Access.app package. So you can either send this .app file to your client, they upload it to SharePoint, and then they allow those users to utilize that app on their SharePoint site. The cool thing that I like about that is because a lot of times the IT departments control who has access to those .app packages, which is very important because in a lot of times those they don't want everybody to be able to use those .app packages, so they completely control that, and IT controls all the security and that kind of stuff. The one problem that I've run into dealing with IT departments is they look at a bunch of Access databases on their local server kind of like herding cats. You know, they've got all these people all over their company. There's a big cereal company that we deal with. It's one of the top two, I'll just say that. And they have dozens and dozens of Access databases that people have created that put on their server, and it's kind of hard to maintain. Whereas when you're dealing with Office web apps, the IT department controls those, so they can tell who has access to that, who doesn't. And also people can't just grab that database and data and take it home. So you can do different things. The other thing I want to kind of point out that I'm going to show you also is that once you can also create an app package for deployment. And so with deployment, you can have it so that you're basically making it available for people. Maybe you want to put that in the Office marketplace. If you've created a really cool CRM tool, you want to share it with other people. In the future, you'll be able to sell those on the Office app marketplace, and then you can also put it on your internal corporate catalog. And you can also, once that's been deployed, you can also handle updating basically versioning your app packages as well. So you can test out all of the different features of that app, all the changes, and then thanks Octavio. He's translating from English into Spanish. Cool. And so once something is deployed, you can release updates to that, so you can test it kind of locally, test it on your own server. When you've got all the bugs worked out, you can deploy that next version. And the cool thing is it knows what tables, what fields you changed, what tables you've added, what fields you've added to forms, and it integrates the data over into the new part. What's really cool about that, we at the Portland Access user group that was in May, they went through one of the Kevins went through a full demonstration of those updates, and it's just really slick how they've done that. Okay. So Charles also said, could you discuss some of the practicals around it, building? Here, I'll move this so maybe people can see it. Deploying a database to a customer. So yeah, I definitely build everything directly, and then you can deploy it on a customer site. For the stuff that I've been doing with both of my customers, I've been able to do it using basically their SharePoint, so that I don't need to worry about copying it back and forth, that kind of stuff. Different approaches to developing and installing it. Yeah, I mean, the one thing you have to keep in mind with Access 2013 is that you're working in a live environment, so you have to be connected to the internet. With Access 2010, that was different. You could actually build your app offline and do everything local, and then upload a copy of the app. But that's not how it works in 2013. And again, I strongly recommend that. Does the customer need Access 365 account? They don't need an Office 365 account unless they want to edit the app themselves. You with any app that you publish, for every one SharePoint license that you have, you can share it with 500 people. So there are people like George Hepworth that created a dog sitting app, and so he paid for one SharePoint license and he shared it with 500 people. He doesn't use SharePoint for the login. He has his own internal login within the app itself, but he can share it to those at once. Yes, and you can host it on your own account. That hasn't really been a problem. Again, you can't build it on your own machine. Can't do that. I noticed you remote accessed into your customer's machine. The only reason I did that is that's because I wanted to show you the way the reporting worked. But I could also make a copy of that. That was a local database, so I can make a copy of their local database and pull it locally in there as well. Marie asked, do you publish updates that you have changed and tested locally this way or in a similar way too? Changing on a live system directly is a huge no-no. I agree 100%. In some cases, we had run into some bugs early on with the Access web apps, where it was not allowing us to, because our database was so large and there were so many macros, it actually wasn't allowing us to save a local app package, which is a real frustration. And we had to make those changes on a live system. We didn't want to do it, we didn't like to do it, but we had to do it. We were kind of stuck that way. They've since worked out those bugs, so that hasn't been a problem since. But that you certainly, as much as possible, you want to be able to work in a what I call a sandbox environment, test everything there, and then upload that to your client. Octavio is saying, hi, Andy. Tomorrow we will discuss all the cloud plans where an Access web app can be used and have a demonstration. Fantastic. So if you don't know, there is, I'm going to pull this up real quick, is if you visit AccessUserGroups.org and go to the right, I'm going to pull this up real quick, go on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's a lot of different chapters. So there's SQL Server with Access. So there's a lot of different groups. So if you attend this Access Latino, I believe it's Access Latino. And so if you join their group, they're having a session on the 17th. And it sounds like he's going to be I see here, he's going to be translating it. It's both English and translating it into Spanish, so you can see that. Covering Azure, Amazon. Good. It's good to hear that you're covering Amazon because I know people have talked about that. SharePoint Online, GoDaddy, Office 365. Good. That's good to know, Octavio. I'll certainly sit on that as well. Okay, so it's 8:02. We've got some great questions. So if you guys have any questions about the way, anything about Access web apps or the way I've done reports, or any of this kind of stuff, please ask any questions here. If I can't answer the question, I guarantee there's somebody else here in the group that can help out. I'm going to go ahead and actually open up the microphone so that other people can talk. And if people start talking over each other, I'll turn. So if anybody has a question that they want to speak up and say it, or if
Okay, Andy, this is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, do you ever just do simple listings on a page and let them print their report using the browser's own menus?
Today we don't. We don't do that because we haven't found it to be really pretty when they print through the browser. One of the things that we talked about doing is actually usually using SSRS, the SharePoint reporting services, to develop online reports so that if people want to do the functionality through that we would allow it. But other than that, the only way that they can get reports right now is, I mean, if they can, certainly any browser you can click on file print, when you do it. But that's the reason why we created the PDFs, is to kind of get around that.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked is sometimes people just want a paper listing rather than a fancy report, and I didn't know if you were doing that, but thank you.
Yeah, we're not doing that. The other thing that we haven't done yet that we're planning on releasing is giving the people the opportunity to download reports in datasheet view, like an Excel or CSV file or something like that.
Right.
But we haven't released that yet either. But that's on the drawing board. Any other questions? Okay, so Dave is mentioning also about Office 365 and SharePoint. There's both. You've got both SharePoint. How do I describe it? With Office 365, you can host things within kind of your own SharePoint world. You can also purchase SharePoint licenses. There's different enterprise licenses through SharePoint to have more of an organization type of environment as well. The other thing that you can do is, for a lot of organizations, we're here in Grand Rapids, and Amway is local. And so with Amway, they operate, they run SharePoint, but that's all housed on a local SharePoint, locally in-house. And so you can, with that SharePoint, that utilizes SQL, local SQL, not SharePoint, SQL Azure, to do that. But you can still host your Access web apps. It's just handled internally that way instead of having it on, your SharePoint online. If anybody else wants to add to that discussion, that's great. Are there SharePoint version restrictions? Well, you need to be running, if you're running SharePoint 2012, I believe SharePoint 2012 or higher, to be able to use a Access 2013 web app, I believe. If somebody can chime in on that, that would be great. Yeah, it looks like Octavio is going to be talking. More about that tomorrow as well.
Andy, Jim again. Can you tell us what you'll be talking about at Access Day?
I'm trying to remember what I'm talking about on Access Day. I know I'm talking about Access web apps, but I'm not positive what I'm speaking on. Does it say on your, do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't looked at the site in a few days, so sorry. The reason I ask is I was wondering if, number one, is Access Day broadcast or is it strictly local? And number two, might it be the same presentation that you would give us here next month?
Yeah, Access Day is local. I don't believe they do any like through live or anything like that where they host it. I think that would be a really cool thing for people that couldn't attend, because I believe that there's a limitation to the number of people that can that can fit into the room. Yeah, so Dave is saying he read the frequently asked questions. It's not being broadcast or recorded, but I think that would be a great thing. So here's what I'm talking about. So Access web apps sound good in theory, but how does it work in the real world? I'll be demonstrating the waterfall calc. Basically, I've actually got another one as well I'm going to be demonstrating. So I'm going to be going through the waterfall calc in detail, which was developed for the mortgage banking industry. I'm going to go through a lot of the pros and cons of designing web apps. There's definitely some gotchas that you have to watch out for when doing that, and some pitfalls and things like that. So, and we'll also be discussing workarounds, because there are, as Tom and I both run into, there are features that we're so used to having within VBA that we don't have in Access web apps, that you really have to kind of take a step back. Remember, in Access web apps, there is no VBA, there is no coding, so all you have is the macro language, and the macro language is pretty robust, but sometimes you have to kind of take a step back to really think about how you're going to approach things in the macro world. For me, I mean, the only time I really run up until getting into Access Web Apps. So the only time I really ran any macros was doing like a close of a form or exiting the database, or auto exec macros or those kind of things. It's really simple things. I really hadn't worked much with the macro system, but if you really want to take advantage, I mean, if you're working with web apps, you really have to learn kind of that language. That's one of those, a little bit of a barrier to entry. Once you get used to it, I really like. I love the drag and drop interface. I love the way you can do grouping of code, so you can open and close groups of code, which is not code but macro groups of macro information. So I really like that part. I like the way that it helps you with the table, automatically fills in table names and field names and all that fun stuff for you. So once you get used to it, you do like it, and it just takes a little bit of time getting used to. So good question.
Hey, Andy, this is Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Hi. I just wanted to step back for just a second and go back to what you were talking about this evening. And there was one thing about the way we set up that database for the waterfall calc. They're running all the time. And when you first, I want to make sure everybody know that when you first set up this connection, we're getting some feedback here. Sorry.
Yeah, someone's tapping away.
No, I think that might be just some feedback from my.
Okay.
I'll close my speaker down there. I'll keep talking. When you first set up that connection, it takes the password, and you can look at the data, and that's great. Well, you close that database and come back, it'll ask you for the password again, which is fine if you're just doing some local reports. But in the situation that we set up for the waterfall calc, we wanted it to be running on a timer event all the time to check and see if there were any reports that needed to be sent. So there is a little bit of code that I ran, and it's not hard to find. You can find something like that on the internet. Basically, we had to store the password in with the link to the tables. So I just want to make everybody aware, if they're going to set something up similar to that, you do have to do a little bit of massaging to get that password into the link for each table, so that it doesn't ask you for the password every time it wants it to access that table.
Great point. Yeah, we also he also built in the SMTP coding to be able to send the emails directly, and that information needs to be in there as well. Good. Anybody else have any other questions? We've got about 15 minutes, so there's still got plenty of time for questions. All right, Jim is saying thanks and see you in Denver. Sounds great, Jim.
Thanks, Andy. Goodbye.
And I just realized we're still recording, so I'm going to stop recording here in case people have other questions that they